This episode of the History of Aviation Podcast is brought to you by True Comfort Heat and Air. Veteran owned and operated, True Comfort Heat and Air. More information in the description below. Guys, definitely be sure and go check out True Comfort Heat and Air. My name is Derrick Beeler, and this is the History of Aviation Podcast for our first bonus episode. And I am joined by Mr. Julien Martinson, Aviation Career Specialist. What's going on, bud?
Hey, thank you for having me on your show today. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about airplanes and the aviation industry. And the history of aviation is really inspiring, and how the history has evolved. Indeed, it impacts us today. So today we're going to talk more about that.
It absolutely does. And boy, do we have a good first bonus episode here, I tell you. I've been excited about it all week.
Yeah, and that's indeed too. So true. So today we're going to be talking about that iconic hijacking of D.B. Cooper, who boarded the airplane on November 24th, 1971. And he boarded the airplane, and he has that iconic look with glasses and smoking a cigarette when we could still smoke on the airplane.
Drinking the whiskey.
Today that's not allowed.
Right. And the whiskey part's still allowed, I think.
Yeah, this is true. Sometimes I still drink whiskey on the airplane, but then I think about D.B. Cooper.
There you go. Get you a parachute and go jump.
But he was very tenacious and came very well prepared with a little note for the flight attendant, and passed it on and said, well, I made a bomb. And in those days, of course, security wasn't that rigid. And so they've changed a lot the protocols for boarding an airplane. But I did not read in my notes that between 1970 and 1972, there was a total of 328 hijackings. And since that episode, since the D.B. Cooper hijacking, because of the change in laws, that has significantly dropped. But enough about that. Let's start with the bit narration about the story of D.B. Cooper and how did it start. So, Derrick, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first off, let's go about. So the flight is 305. Northwest Orient Airlines, and the plane is a 727-100, which actually we just covered on episode number 50 of the History of Aviation podcast. We covered that particular plane, and we had flight attendant Allison on with us, who served on that plane, and she told us about how her airline actually obtained this actual airplane that the D.B. Cooper incident happened in. So the guy walks in, or the guy boards the plane, rather, and he's got this briefcase with this apparatus in it of wires and red sticks, and says, hey, this is an explosive device, right?
Yeah, that's what the flight attendants saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So he demands $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, a fuel truck standing by to fuel the plane up so it can take off again.
Yeah, so the money was handed to him in a briefcase, and he had 4 parachutes. And so the idea is that they were not sure if he had any accomplices on board. And so the idea was that maybe there's possibly 4 hijackers, or he was going to take some of the other passengers with him and jump out of the plane. And this is the reason why they asked for parachutes. Now it's possible that they tinkered with the parachutes to make them not open up, or that they were not correct, and so there's still a debate about that. But so he had the 4 parachutes, and but I don't know how he was able to identify the ones that he was going to jump with, because there was military parachutes and private air parachutes for skydiving. And honestly, I don't know the difference, but maybe Davy Cooper was able to identify how the air parachutes were folded, and so forth. Yeah, um, so they were flying, and then they asked to. He asked for this money, and they came on board with this suitcase and the parachutes, and then they took off again. Did they not?
Correct. Yeah.
And
So yeah.
mhm.
So I mean
Well, go ahead.
that was a completely planned by him. So I mean, you think about the 4 parachutes. So obviously, he wanted to check those parachutes. He wanted 4 to make sure one of them was good to jump with. He supposedly takes the money and straps it to his chest and jumps out the aft staff doors.
Yeah. So the aft of that aircraft had a staircase that would go down.
Correct.
And by pushing a button or something,
which no longer exists.
Yeah, the aft staircase would go down,
right.
And this is how passengers were able to plane and deplane. And so during the flight, he ordered the stewardess and the captain to stay in the plane, and he lowered the staircase, and he waited and waited, and then at some point he took his precious cargo, his money,
right.
and his parachutes, and jumped out of the airplane. But the real question is, did he actually survive the jump? And so now I know this is a point of the debate for many people, but perhaps Derrick, you could explain me your point of view, and if there's anybody else that may have another point of view on if he actually survived.
To spite popular belief, I guess a lot of us, especially a lot of us aviation enthusiasts that have flown, we'd like to believe he did complete the jump. And that's just kind of like a fantasy thing, like where, we'll talk later about DB Cooper Festival and all that, but it's kind of a thing where, you would like to think that he completed the jump and landed and got away scot-free with the money. But they never found the body. So that's they never found the parachutes. They never found the body. They did find the money. It was in 1980, correct? They found
I believe they just found a portion of the money.
A portion of the money, correct.
And yes. It was, the theory is that when he jumped, they were able to establish the flight plan of the aircraft. And then he jumped, and I'm not familiar with the terrain over that area. It could have been bush or trees or somewhat.
Yeah, it's straight up forest in that area. Very Canada-like where you're from, yeah.
So he fell into the trees, then it's possible that he could have gotten stuck in the branches, and he was dangling there, and he wiggled his way down and dislodged the parachute. But I always have an iconic and idealistic view of my heroes in my stories, and that they always survive. And so,
of course,
I'm going with the gut feeling that if they did not find the body or any parachute or his bags, that he did survive, and he collected the things, and maybe he went to the road and got hitchhiked out of there, or he had an accomplice to meet and pick him up. So those are some theories. However, the money that was dropped followed the streamline, and they found it so many kilometers further. And so the theory is, how did that money get from that flight path to the location to where they found the money? And so the debate is, did the money get there by itself, or did DB Cooper walk and hide that money? And that money was found years later, partially decomposed.
Correct.
However, the police at the time was very smart, and they gave Davy Cooper registered notes. And so those notes, the numbers on those notes were numbered, and they were distributed throughout the casinos and the banks. So if you're seeing these notes, they correspond with DB Cooper. And so the banknotes that they did find in the at that location had the numbers that corresponded
matching
to the
numbers, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so the FBI did a big investigation, and it went on years and years and years, and they collected the DNA of they collected his tie. So he jumped, but he left his tie and the tie clip on the aircraft, and so there was DNA on that tie, and so from that they were able to establish the DNA of DB Cooper, and he also had DNA on his cigarette butts and on the plastic cup that he used.
Right.
But they weren't able to retrieve the glass cup because there was just lost with too many others. So that was not a good lead. However, they did find the DNA, and file stayed open for many, many, many years, and it was a mystery that that haunted the aviation industry for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely it did. And let's dive into what this particular episode's about. So how did this event and this hijacking, in this case, whatever you want to call it, however you want to view it, whether he completed the jump or didn't complete the jump, how did this change aviation security? How did this change airline security?
Well, there's lots of changes that came into place since that incident. So they were able to tell the vulnerability of commercial flights, and the incident highlighted how easily a determined individual can exploit the vulnerabilities in the commercial aviation industry and hijack a plane. And so, as I mentioned,
walk right on.
In the early 70s, hijackings were very common. And so from my experience, there was a special, there's a word that they use among flight attendants to communicate with the captain to indicate that there's a hijacking going on. And so these types of protocols have been put in place. In addition, there's the need for passenger screening. And so prior to the Cooper hijacking, there was minimal security checks for passengers boarding domestic and international flights. But since then, the screening for passengers has become more rigid to detect weapons and explosive devices. And thirdly, there's been crew training for hijacking scenarios and how to manage hijackers, how to appease them, and how to finally safeguard the interests of the passengers as well as the equipment, and finally the crew, the flight crew. And there's many changes that happen in the industry. So we mentioned the passenger screening. And we also talk about the Cooper vanes. So this is a special device that makes it impossible to open the aft staircase in flight, ensuring that a hijacker cannot repeat Cooper's method to escape the airplane. Right. And they also strengthened cockpit security. So the cockpit door is now locked with a delay device, and there's a protocol to call the cockpit before by the flight director. And finally, they have air marshals program also came on board to enforce the laws of flight. And so you'll see some air marshals on board the aircraft equipped with guns, but not on all airplanes. And since the Davy Cooper hijacking, we have seen a reduction in hijackings and improved security screening on both international and domestic aviation security. And so these are all benefits that happen because of the DB Cooper hijacking. Yeah, so the industry has advanced a lot, and now hijackings are very remote.
Right.
The last one that I heard of was with September 11th.
Of course.
That was over 20 years ago, which also significantly impacted the aviation industry.
Well, was there not? Let's go back to 1971 real quick.
Uh-huh.
So in 1971, you have your luggage. I guess, and I was not around then, so I don't know. So I guess you just walk out and climb up some stairs and go into the airplane.
Well, I think in those days, aviation was in its infancy. And I was born in 1975, so it's before my time. And I was an
Same here. I
infant
was born in 80. Yeah.
So it's a little bit before my time, but I imagine that it was very similar to boarding a Greyhound bus,
Right.
or a local train. And so you went to the ticket counter, you paid your ticket, you got your fare, and they announced your flight, and you showed your ticket, and off you went. And so that's how that happened.
That easy.
Yeah, and so I don't think at that time they even had jetways. So you would have to go outside, walk across the tarmac, and then board the aircraft through a mobile staircase. So jetways weren't invented then, and so that's how it went. And so it was much more casual and accessible, and so these incidences were much easier to happen.
Right.
And also they had incidences of stowaways where people would board the aircraft illegally and hide in the bathroom or in the lavatory. And then all of a sudden in flight, this additional passenger appears. But that's enough
That's no good.
I know, but that's enough for another episode.
Right.
But we have those, that's how the industry was in those days. But now everything has to be checked and cross-checked. And so when you're bored, your list has to correspond with a no-fly list. So if you're on the no-fly list, you cannot board an airplane. And what we do see are a lot of increases in passenger conflicts and passengers getting angry on board the airplane.
Oh yeah,
and,
of course.
And fighting over masks and fighting for a seat. And so we do see those things. And as a result of that, many passengers have been banned from flying the airplane. And so that list has to then be, so every time people board, if your passport does not correspond with, if your name is not on that no-fly list, then you're able to board the airplane. So those are other protocols that have been put in place in order to ensure the safety of passengers and the flight. There's so much at risk when there's a flight, because you're dealing with the lives of people in a very tight space. People are not always comfortable sitting so close together, and the airplane moves at very fast speeds at altitudes that are not made for human survival. So there's lots of things that can go wrong. And so in order to ensure this, a lot of safety protocols have been put in place for that.
So, I mean, do you know, so in 1971, when the D.B. Cooper incident took place, so now, you know, we're what, 2 hours? We need to get to the airport 2 hours, maybe more?
Yeah.
So, yeah, what was it back then? I mean, could you just show up 10 minutes before your flight, just get on the plane?
Well, I know for sure, but I'm sure that it half an hour, 20 minutes before your flight, people could possibly buy tickets and board their flight. There's a lot of, so with passengers, there's two types. There's the traveling vacation passenger, which typically buys their tickets well in advance. But the business traveler in those days, they would buy their tickets last minute and often change itineraries last minute or cancel. So it was very common for a business traveler to arrive to an airplane and say, okay, one flight for this destination. And they would go on that flight and fly to that destination for the afternoon or for the day or the week, and then come back home.
So in the D.B. Cooper case, we want to make sure we let everybody know that he actually identified as Dan Cooper, not D.B. Cooper. That was later changed by a news outlet of some kind. So D.B. Cooper, as we know him now, boarded this plane looking like a business traveler. Because back then, now we get on planes in flip-flops and shorts and a T-shirt and we look like a bum. Back then, when people traveled, they dressed much more nicer. They, I'm not throwing off on us now, but what I'm saying is it's so much more casual now than it was back then when people, I remember my grandfather talking about putting a suit on to eat supper. So, things were a little bit different there as far, I guess that would be culturally.
That would be the culture, but it was all the era. People just had more finesse and dress etiquette was more enforced.
Right.
And so flying itself was for the elite. And
yes,
people identified with flying as an experience exclusive to the elite, and so therefore they would dress to the occasion to participate in the flight experience. In those days, also was the golden age of aviation, and airplanes competed with cruise ships, and that was very much a lifestyle of the elite. And you had to wear dresses and suits and a tie, and they were all dressed up. And it's still a little bit like that in business class, but in economy, the dress code is very much more relaxed. So things have changed a lot over the last 40 years.
And now we're just chomping onto an airplane in our Jimmy Buffett flip flops and swimming trunks, ready to go to the beach, right?
Yeah, but our whole society is like that too now. So. It used to be when I was a flight attendant, flight attendants had to do deadheading. So be on an airplane, but for business, but you're not working the flight. And this, you had to dress business casual. And recently, the dress code, for example, with Air Canada was leggings were allowed for females. And I'm like, that's like yoga wear. So that was socially appropriate for flight attendants. So the flight attendant crew deadheading on a flight did not necessarily have to wear a pants or a dress. Now they can wear leggings. So this is not only does it affect passengers, but it also affects the crew that are operating the flight as deadheading or repositioning flights. So it affects that as well. So, but I really like the class of flying when you board the airplane and you have a nice pressed shirt. Every time I board the airplane, I always make sure I put on a new shirt. Maybe not a suit, but I like to wear a shirt.
No, I'm that guy. Yeah. I'm an American, Julien. I'm chomping up in my flip flops and my swim trunks and T-shirt.
Well, you do your thing, and that's fair enough.
We're going to the beach. Let's go. Right
there, you are.
Do you have anything else to add as far as the impact on security?
No, because I've covered my main points. However, one little last final thought is that
absolutely,
security is going to continue to evolve, particularly with biometric scanning. So we tried some scenarios where passengers would do a biometric scan for business class, which would give them access to the snack lounge, Toronto Pearson Airport, for example.
Sure.
And so if you're in business class, you could do your biometric scan. And so this is how they introduce these pilot projects for biometric scanning. And so they let that go for a few months, and then they analyze it and see if they were able to successfully match the picture taken check-in and correspond it with the picture taken at the snack bar. And then once that is successful, then they'll start doing that type of stuff on certain flights. It's maybe like domestic. And then after that, they'll introduce it throughout their for all the flights. So this is how security is changing, and so you're going to be taking a picture as you
Now,
check your bag in.
is
And
that
that
is that a like for a frequent traveler? Is that like a pre-scan kind of deal, or am I
um,
confused here?
at this time, I'm not aware if the computer will retain your image over several months, or if your image uh, is solely used for that specific day. So there could be the possibility of both.
Right.
But they're
Yeah.
trying, just for privacy reasons, they're trying with these pilot projects that the image that they capture is exclusively for the day of travel and does not
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
stay into
Absolutely.
their database. But if you have biometric scanning, then you scan your image once. They at the security, they scan your face at boarding, and they'll know exactly who you are, and and so it makes the whole system much more efficient. However, the danger is that as the industry progresses to embrace more technology for passengers, it'll become more and more difficult to distinguish one airline from the other because processes have become so automated. So they buy the tickets online, they arrive to the airport, they check their own bag in, they put their own tag on, they go through the
Right.
biometric scanning, they go through there, they go through security, they board the airplane, and it's only by the time they get on the airplane that they actually see the flight attendant for the first time. And then it's,
Okay.
oh, today we've got an orange scarf or a red scarf or a blue scarf. And it's only at
Right.
that
Yeah.
point that the passenger really is able to distinguish one airline from another airline because everything else is completely automated. Uh,
Right.
so, so as airlines um, embrace more and more technology into their process, into their sales process, and into their boarding process, airlines will have to compete harder and harder in order to reinforce their brand in the minds of their passengers, because so much of the travel experience will be streamlined and automated. So there's advantages and disadvantages on the security, and so this is how it's going to go in the future. So it's going to be interesting to see how the industry evolves and how the industry progresses month over month and year over year with new technology. And it'll be interesting to see how passengers respond and if they're actually able to distinguish one travel experience from another travel experience, because it's going to be so similar.
Definitely. And let's dive into my favorite part of the whole DB Cooper thing is the amount of information that is out there about DB Cooper. Media and lectures, movies. They made a Robert Duvall movie. The name escapes me of that movie. You know it? I think it was
Uh,
like the Hunt for DB Cooper or something like that.
I'm not familiar with anything that, but I know that they made movies and that there's a festival for
The
DB
festival.
Cooper.
That's what I want to dive into because I have seen
Uh,
videos of this festival, and this is in Vancouver,
mm,
Washington State. Um, it cracks me up, and then, not that I'm laughing or making fun of anybody, but you got guys that are dressed up like DB Cooper. There's a parade. There's a guest speaker. There's trivia nights. Everybody's drinking, having a good time, and it just cracks me up that these folks and that's the East Coast. That's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, and I've never been to anything like that. But it fascinates me that every year these folks get together and they just have a big time, and they're dressed up, and there's actually reenactments. There's actually been reenactments of DBK, and it's just and it's a little bit different culture out there. As me and you have two different cultures as well. Me being from the southern United States, and you being from Canada, but the DB Cooper Fest just absolutely fascinates me.
well, that's something to plan for the next round. and then you and I can go to Vancouver, Washington, and dress like DB Cooper.
We'll get dressed up like DB Cooper. We'll head out there. But here's what's funny about that, and it has a lot to do with cultural differences. I'm in Tennessee. I'm in East Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
Every year, 4 to 5 times a year in different locations throughout the South is the Dukes of Hazzard Festival.
Mm.
So when you break, you know what Dukes of Hazzard is, right? Okay. So when you have the Dukes of Hazzard Festival, that's the car jumping, doing all this stuff. It's actually very similar in a way that's what I grew up with as a child watching on television. And I wanted to see the car jump, and I wanted to see this and that. It's really the same kind of principle of any kind of festival you go to. It's something that people are remembering, and they're actually preserving history.
And this is, you've really hit the nail on the head. This is how they preserve history. But at the same time, the industry has changed, and it'll continue to change. And this also opens up an opportunity, and I just want to touch on this very lightly.
Absolutely.
The opportunities for many career opportunities in the aviation industry, in the security sector, and technology development, biometric scanning, efficiency, robotics, all those types of programs are coming into the industry and making it more efficient. Recently, I read that the industry is going to produce 2,700 new aircraft, all with the modern technology, fiber optic, fiber composite materials, etc. And so there's lots of opportunities for career development in this industry, both for pilots, aircraft engineers, and aircraft manufacturing. And I don't know, you're Tennessee, but in Ontario has the third largest industry in Ontario is aerospace and aviation. And there's over 260 companies that produce aircraft parts. Now, I did not know that, but they are there.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So if you're looking for a big tire, or if you're looking for a cockpit seat, then we're the place to go to shop for those kinds of things.
Absolutely. Canadian Tire, right?
Yeah, exactly. But no, those are car tires. I'm talking about aircraft tires. Yeah, so they're slightly different. So
exactly, yeah.
The industry is growing a lot, and so it's a great opportunity for young people to get on board, participate in an industry that is progressive, that's integrative, that is globally connected, and if you come with the good degrees and diplomas, you can get a very good salary out of the gate. So I highly encourage people to reach out to that if you want more information.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, all in all, when we think about DB Cooper, and it's something that has really, I know I talked to Allison a lot about it, and it'll probably go on well beyond our time that people will still be talking about DB Cooper. And it's a very strange kind of thing because, I know a lot of people in the aviation industry. Some people call him a hero. Some people call him a downright low-down criminal. So, and to sum it all up, I think we'll never know if he made the jump successfully. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, unless the FBI actually finds secure evidence, then no, we're not going to know. But I don't know. I have my gut feeling, and I idolize people that do successful things, but I don't know if that's always correct. There's that fantasy of the heroism, but on the other hand, what he did was wrong.
It was very wrong
to ask for that much money, and because that money comes from the expense of hijacking, and had he gotten on board and had they not provided that money, can you imagine how many lives would have been lost if he actually pulled the trigger on that device and you had an explosion? We see a lot of explosions aviation history, and none of them end really well. So
I've often wondered, though, if it was actually a real bomb. Since we're being open on this podcast here, I've often wondered that. Maybe, and that's another thing. We'll never know. We'll never know.
Speculate,
Exactly.
But I'm wondering but how many people would, cut PVC pipe and put,
some red paint on it.
Yeah, spray paint it with red and then fill it with cornstarch and wrap some wires around it and then say it's a bomb. I don't know how many people would do that. And
True.
I don't know anything about bombs. So
I don't either. So
don't ask me about that.
No, there's no bombs here on the History of Aviation podcast. 0 bombs. But what we do have is a hashtag here to tell you about. And it is the hashtag DB Cooper podcast. So if you head over to our Facebook page, which I'll find it here in just a second. So that is www.facebook.com/History of Aviation Podcast. If you'll head over there, we've got a whole forum open where you can give your opinion on DB Cooper. Did he successfully make the jump? Who was he? Who do you think he was? It's wide open to suggestion. Everybody can just argue there. And that is hashtag DB Cooper Podcast, or you can head over to the Facebook page, which is listed in the description below. That is www.facebook.com/History of Aviation Podcast. Julien, what is your social media going on?
So I'm available on Facebook and on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and you can just search for me at Julien Martinson.
Well,
and yep,
I'll have those links in the description below. But you was actually just on our podcast for the first time a while back, and you got the you wrote the book. Tell us briefly about the book. I have read it.
So that book,
Delta Airlines has not hired me yet, but I have read it.
So that book is called The Ultimate Guide to Careers in Aviation. So the target for that book are Gen Z. So if you know anybody that's coming out of high school that is looking for a career and they're just not sure which industry appeals to them, and they want that first touch point with the aviation industry, this book is the go-to book. So the first chapter, we talk briefly about the history of aviation and touch on some of the highlights so that we know where we're coming from. And then in the second chapter, we talk about where is the aviation industry today, outside of COVID, of course. But we talk about the total number of metric tons of cargo that's being shipped, the total number of pilots, airports, and passengers being transported by the industry. And we look at some of the accomplishments current. And then from there, we look at 4 main careers that are available in the industry. We look at pilot careers, aircraft engineers, air traffic control, and aviation management. So aviation management is the management of airport operations and airline operations. And as many people know, the airports and airlines have a symbiotic relationship. So they're very different because one is managing a building and the other one is managing equipment, that being airplanes.
Right, absolutely.
And so they function very differently, but they rely heavily on each other. And so, of course, every aircraft and every flight has to have a point of departure and a point of arrival. And so aviation management involves some questions about maximizing the profitability and the efficiency of the airline performance, and as well as the performance of the airport in terms of passenger flow efficiency and meeting the passengers' needs while they're in the airport itself. And then finally, the last chapter, we look at some job hunting skills, which include resume writing, networking, and interviewing skills. So it's the first touch point book for a young person that is open to exploring careers. And it's available on Amazon in both a soft cover and a digital cover. And aviation is a global industry. So anywhere in the world where you have access to Amazon, you're able to purchase this book.
Absolutely. And I'll put all those links in the podcast below. Julien, our own David Rowe, I call him personally the aircraft encyclopedia. Have you been over to aerophile.com?
Aerophile.com.
Aerophile.com. It's up on the screen there. If you check that out, you will be lost in aircraft videos and photos like you would not believe. So we want to give a shout out to David Rowe, which is one of our normal co-hosts here when we do aircraft. He's got airfile.com. You could find it on, I'll put obviously the links in the description below, but it's everywhere. So be sure and check that out. And our other regular co-host for regular episodes is Mr. Dave Gorman. And as I like to call him, a man about town. So you can find Dave Gorman on Instagram. It's Dave Gorman. And on YouTube, Gormania Videos. All that stuff is in the link below. As well as what we got going on here, Julien. We have the DB Cooper discussion. So we got, head over to our Facebook page. I tell you, we're gonna discuss this and get it real. And that is www.facebook.com History of Aviation Podcast. So be sure and check all that out. I enjoyed it, Julien.
Thank you. Likewise, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be on your podcast and to talk about aviation. And there's just nothing more than passions me in the world than airplanes.
That's the same here for me. And then there's so many different aspects of it. I mean, we typically normally talk about aircraft, with David Rowe and Dave Gorman, my walking encyclopedias. And it's good. These bonus episodes are to branch out, and we got a 2-part series coming up about Howard Hughes, Amelia Earhart. What's some of the other things we got coming up in these bonus episodes?
Oh, we're going to be talking about the legacy airlines and how they were started. So we're going to talk about Lufthansa, British Airways, and my favorite airline, of course,
Air Canada.
Air Canada. And how they were created and what are the challenges that they faced during the infancy of airline development, and how is it that the airlines grew to the size that they are now. And what's the interesting part in the industry is the emergence of low-cost carriers as well as ultra low-cost carriers.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah, but they exist. So
true.
Ultra low cost carriers. So in Canada we have airlines like WestJet and Sunwing, and in the States we have Spirit Airlines, and in Europe there's Ryanair, and among others that have come in with a much different model. And there's also airport development, how the airports have changed and which airports are reaching capacity, and what new airports that are coming up are taking on the role of mature airports. For example, smaller airports will have the complete image of a developed airport. They'll have their own concept, their own marketing strategy, their own environmental initiatives. So all those touch points that big airports have, medium and small airports will also embrace those
right. Absolutely.
trigger points that passengers are looking for, access to technology, possibly sleeping pods, entertainment, accessibility by metro to city center. Those types of concepts are going to be now incorporated into the medium-sized airport plan. And we should not forget about supersonic travel. We can talk about the Concorde. And,
the Concorde, yes.
And outer space travel. people still have their tickling for those types of things as well. So we'll be putting episodes together for those types of topics. And I would like to invite, if there's any of our audiences that have a particular subject that would like to be discussed, kindly reach out to us, and we would be happy to incorporate some of your thoughts and desires into these podcasts as well.
And that's one of the things I want to say when you listen to this podcast, whether you're watching it on TikTok or you're watching we do reels on TikTok and all that, and YouTube and Facebook. If you're watching it there, everything's in the description below. If you're listening to it, everything's in the description below. We actually have a telephone number you can leave voicemail feedback for, and it's all down there. And I don't feel like a lot of people go down there. I call it the basement. That's where all of our information is. So if you go down there, you can contact us anyway, and we'll absolutely respond to you without question. So, but something you was mentioning about airlines that I found interesting. I've been watching a series on Prime Video. So first off, Prime Video is really plentiful with aviation material. So if you have Prime Video, it has endless aviation material. And I come across a series called Inside British Airways. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but I came across it. I've been watching it, and absolutely amazing. Some of the first class accommodations with British Airways out of Heathrow. It's absolutely amazing. And it just amazes me because I always ride, I'm that guy. I'm back there in coach, but it just, if you go to Amazon Prime, and they don't support this podcast or anything like that, but Amazon Prime Video is just chocked full of aviation. So definitely check that out. I enjoyed it, Julien.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And this is it right here. It's how you do B. Cooper. So enjoyed it. So we'll go out with True Comfort Heat. This episode of the History of Aviation podcast is brought to you by True Comfort Heat and Air. Veteran owned and operated, True Comfort Heat and Air. More information in the description below.